Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribley. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. It's the second week of the 2018 legislative session. We now have our first look at what rewriting the public school funding formula would mean to K-12 education. House Bill 957 is also known as the Mississippi Uniform Per Student Funding Formula Act of 2018. It was filed late Thursday. Its author is Republican House Speaker Philip Gunn. According to figures presented this week, the state would spend $107 million more than current levels, but still roughly $150 million less than what the existing Mississippi Adequate Education Program recommends. In addition, the MAEP rewrite would not call for changing property tax rules in the formula, so wealthier areas would pay more, which was initially recommended. The recommendations to change the funding formula are from EdBuild, a nonprofit education group hired by Republican leadership. The state would also set the cost to educate each student at $4,800. The MAEP formula has been fully funded by the legislature only twice in the past 2 decades. Governor Phil Bryant delivered the annual State of the State address to a joint session of the legislature on Tuesday night. He outlined his priorities for the 2018 session. They include workforce development, expanding school choice, and funding a trooper school. The governor's also focused on transforming Medicaid and the public education funding formula. Here are some highlights from the governor's State of the State speech.
It should be no surprise to anyone that I am a strong supporter of updating the adequate education funding formula. I believe it should serve as a roadmap to success for every child in Mississippi's public schools. It should not be a political prop used to allege someone's failure to support education. That old trick hasn't worked in the past, and it won't work this year. By the way, most of us want more than just an adequate education system in Mississippi. We want a great one. Thank you. We want a great one. One thing I'm certain of, that greatness will not be possible without every classroom having the right teacher. We must do all in our power to allow good teachers to become great ones. This should include continuing to fund at the highest level Teach for America and nationally board certified teachers. Data proves these dedicated teachers in most every instance produce better results. We have so many great teachers across the state, and I know, like me, you are very proud of them all. This session, I will ask you again to expand school choice for certain categories of children, offering special needs scholarships to even more students. I continue to believe that parents should have the freedom to use their tax dollars to send their child to the school of their choice, not one decided by the government. Medicaid costs have continued to increase, straining our state and federal budgets. Frankly, we've spent far too many years believing that funding for Medicaid is unlimited and should be unquestioned. We must change that way of thinking. We must also insist that positive health care outcomes be the first responsibility of Medicaid recipients. Patients, providers, and managed care companies should realize a new normal will exist from this day forward. Our goal will be to prevent poor health care from getting worse and to get Medicaid patients well. As you know, I've requested a workforce requirement for able-bodied adults from the Center of Medicaid and Medicare Services. Now, this is not, as some would have you believe, a punitive action aimed at recipients. It will actually help this population reap the rewards of a good job and one day receive health care coverage from their employer, not the state or federal government. Recently, I tasked the Department of Human Services and Medicaid to work together to identify needs for beneficiaries and address them in a more proactive and effective manner. I have contemplated moving Medicaid eligibility to DHS, something that is done in 46 other states. However, with a change in leadership of the Division of Medicaid, I now believe it would be prudent to delay such a transfer until a complete review of its benefits to providers and beneficiaries can be completed. I believe the current leadership at these two agencies can create a seamless service model, and it can be implemented. We must not only manage Medicaid for today's needs, but assure sustainability for future demands. Those in extended care facilities should not be told we cannot continue to fund their very existence. If we manage the system properly and eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse, we can assure a better quality of life for those truly in need. Your assistance in properly framing the Medicaid Technical Amendments Act will certainly make all the difference in maintaining an effective and sustainable Medicaid program for years to come.
The Democrats were not impressed with what the governor had to say. Here's Representative Jay Hughes of Oxford with the Democratic response.
I love my Mississippi, but the simple facts are that we're still last in education, last in mental health and health care access, first in poverty, and first in the brain drain of our young graduates. If we're number one in problems, then we sure ought to be number one in solutions. Unfortunately, the policies that impact our quality of life have merely gone unchanged and underfunded. Simply ignoring a problem is not a solution. Over half of Mississippi towns are smaller than 1,500 people, and a Golden Shovel Award doesn't educate our children or put food on the table in your average Mississippi home. Our first problem is equality in public education. The simple reality is that there is no equality with the type of school buildings, classroom supplies, or technology from one school district to the next. And it's this division that continues to keep Mississippi in last place every year. Every single school should have at least the exact same basic resources for the children. Not one school district having new computers and robotics machines, and the school district next door having calculators and popsicle sticks. We are also testing students to death. Testing is not teaching. It is nothing but profits for testing corporations and campaign contributions for politicians. A simple solution for equal and better public schools is to quit playing games with the funding. As Governor Barbour and Governor Bryant have both proclaimed before the privatization dollars made their way to Jackson, education is not an expense. It is an economic investment and the best one we can make. But politicians who don't have a clue about classrooms just can't leave it alone. It doesn't matter what the legislatures name a new formula if they are not going to fund it every single year. And we also need to stop the standardized testing and stop the exit exams like so many other states have done. Let our students take the ACT the taxpayers are already paying for. Let the teachers have the freedom to teach, just like they get to do in the charter schools that the big campaign donors love so dearly. Our second problem is needing real jobs in all communities, not just the lucky ones. Part-time minimum wage jobs without benefits do not lift anyone out of poverty. Imagine if instead of hundreds of millions in tax cuts to foreign corporations that are already here, that we gave state-guaranteed expansion loans to Mississippi Main Street companies like Womble Machine Shop or McCurdy Construction. Those jobs are companies creating real local jobs. Our third problem is the brain drain. Mississippi is losing our graduates to other states faster than any other state. You shouldn't have to go to another state to visit your children and grandchildren. Sure, the Mississippi unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in years, but so is the rest of the country. The real problem is that our unemployment rate is still one of the highest in the country, and even worse for our 20 to 24-year-olds at 14.3%, which is exactly why we're losing them to Atlanta and Nashville. Imagine if instead of corporate tax cuts, we offered Mississippi Main Street companies that for 3 years we would cover the health insurance of each Mississippi graduate they hire and keep employed. Or imagine if we were to repay the student loans each year from Mississippi college graduates that go back to work in the Mississippi hometown where they graduated high school. These are real solutions that improve the real lives of the state. Unfortunately, these solutions don't have lobbyists or campaign donors. We have the money in the Capitol building in Jackson. We just have the wrong priorities.
The governor did not talk about funding state infrastructure needs or the possibility of forming a state lottery. We spoke with many legislators, both Democrats and Republicans, after the governor's speech. Here's what they had to say.
Well, I thought it was a very good speech. It just told the governor that I was particularly appreciative of his noting all the accomplishments that sometimes get lost in the shuffle: the job creation, the unemployment rate, the economic development, and the medical information he talked about, particularly his comments about Medicaid. I thought were right on target. So it was a good speech.
Fed the red meat to the base, but it's okay. I thought he did a good job. He just left a lot of big things out of the speech that should have been in it.
I enjoyed the comments that he made about reconciliation and coming together, working together to move Mississippi forward. And I believe that our colleagues will take on that initiative and agenda. We'll pull together to make Mississippi a better place to live.
He's saying that he was not going to push moving the case management services from Medicaid to Department of Human Services was good when it was there. I thought it was a bad experience. I wish he had talked about transportation infrastructure because there's such a great need and some other things that we can do as far as job creation. But we're willing to work with him and his leadership and trying to do what we can. But transportation infrastructure is so important that there's no way we can have a state of the state and not address that issue because our state depends so heavily on it.
The House appears to be moving quickly to finding solutions to fund road and bridge repairs in Mississippi. Another part of their plan passed the House this week. House Bill 722 would divert more than $100 million to be split among cities and counties for infrastructure. It would come from the state use tax, which is paid on goods shipped to customers in Mississippi from outside the state. The bill overwhelmingly passed the House with bipartisan support by a vote of 118-0. Here's some of the discussion from the House floor before the vote was taken.
This bill today indicates that on a bipartisan basis, I believe there was no opposition. We can work together for transportation. But let me say this, the number of bridges closed in the rural counties of this state is going to be in the hundreds. The number of miles and there's no way that the local governments can afford that. If you double the property tax base, there's no way some of these counties can afford it. The improvements that we need on our roads in this state are massive, but if we plan and do a comprehensive plan like we've done before, on a basis where we all support it, it can happen. I have confidence that the chairman, the speaker, and the others in charge can develop a comprehensive highway program.
This is the most transformative, the most important piece of legislation that I've seen in my time for local government. We're talking about an immediate, next year, at least $108 million infusion into the infrastructure needs of our local counties and municipalities with the changes on the horizon that most people think are likely. Very easily could be $150 million plus going back to our local cities and counties in the very near future. So with that said, I'd ask that everybody support this legislation. Let's make it a bipartisan effort.
Question now recurs on House Bill 722. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 118 yeas, 0 nays, the bill passes.
The other parts of the plan include issuing bonds to raise $50 million for bridge improvements, freezing all new road construction with some exceptions, and setting aside future state revenue growth up to $100 million for roads and bridges. Half would go to the state and half would go to cities and counties. We haven't heard much from the Senate side on how to fund improvements to roads and bridges. Here's Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves on the issue.
I will say that if it is believed that the bills that have passed the House will solve our infrastructure challenges, the Senate may just pass them as is and we'll move on to the next issue. I'm hopeful that we will increase funding for roads and bridges. I think I believe roads and bridges are a core function of government. It's not limited to roads and bridges, by the way, when we talk about infrastructure. I will tell you that it is water and sewer systems as well. We certainly are seeing here in Jackson the challenges that old water and sewer systems have and the havoc that they can wreak. The fact is, in the last 6 years that I've been Lieutenant Governor, we have spent $7.2 billion on infrastructure through the Mississippi Department of Transportation. We think that it's important that we find additional resources to spend on roads and bridges. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that during this particular legislative session, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to work with folks within the Senate as well as our friends over in the House of Representatives to get that done. I don't think a gas tax will be included in that. You know, at the end of the day, the fact is that you know, we all have our theories and we all have all the different opinions on what's the best way to do this and the best way to do that. But at the end of the day, when you are a leader of a chamber, the most important thing that you have to understand is math. And for a revenue measure to pass in the Mississippi Senate, it takes a 3/5 vote. That's to raise taxes or to lower taxes. And I do not believe that there are 32 members of the Mississippi Senate that will vote to raise the gas tax. And so because of that, we'll look for other avenues and other ways to find solutions to what I think, and this is good news, that we all agree that it is an issue that we need to find a solution to.
So let's get straight to the point with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones law firm and a former member of the House. Austin Barber is a Republican national strategist. He's the founding partner of the Clearwater Group. Austin, Brandon, good to have you with us, as always.
Thanks, good to be here.
Let's start with education. Austin, finally, we see the results, the product of this EdBuild research project, as it were. Does it have any chance of passing in its current form?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a sort of a very good general question that you're asking and should be discussed today. I think it does, but there's a ton of nuance within the debate about this formula. And I think that we've been talking about it for 2 years now. I'm glad to see that it's finally out there. There's a bill, legislators, school superintendents, principals, parents, and so forth can finally see what's in the bill. You know, from my understanding of this is what the plan is there's going to be a baseline of funding from the state of Mississippi of $4,800 per kid. Per student, okay? That's the baseline that everybody would get, the floor. And then school districts or children within those school districts would be eligible for state funding for different reasons. If they have special needs, if they're gifted, if they're rural, if they're in a poor urban district. So all these different things to increase the $4,800 number. So the debate will be, what should those multipliers or add-ons, whatever you want to be, how much should that be? What should they be? That'll be sort of one debate. And then the other debate, which was brought out by EdBuild, who is the group that wrote this formula and this plan, is how should the counties be responsible for spending more money, getting more money from taxpayers to help offset some of these poor districts. So should Madison County taxpayers have to pay more in taxes so that we can help self-support Holmes County or Humphreys County? So those are just some of the debates that will happen with this process. But I think it's good. They're setting priorities. Big priority, of education, and then we're going to prioritize where that money goes, not just say, you know, we're just going to give you one blanket check for every school district.
Yeah, well, Democrats have been talking about the need to see the plan, to get their hands on it. That's what Austin made reference to right there at the top. And so it is a good thing to have a product, to have something that you can put to the test, that you can have some public forums about and so forth. And so that's the first thing. And look, those of us here at this set and throughout the state haven't had a chance yet to really sink our teeth into the details, but it's nice to know that we're going to have that opportunity to vet, and that's something I've, you know, banged a drum about in here many, many times. So that's a good thing. I don't think that Philip Gunn's going to be able to get a job at an advertising agency when he leaves the legislature. That is one of the most disjointed and long names for a bill I've ever heard. We went from MAEP to, I think, like a 30-name title that Wilson read out a minute ago. So I would offer a friendly amendment to change the name of your bill. It's not a good one. But look, we've got serious substantive issues here. I have said before that we are going to be looking at the bottom line number to see if that comes in lower than the existing formula. It seems pretty clear that this number is lower. One of the things that has been a concern for Democrats throughout this process is that at the end of all this, Republicans claim victory for essentially setting the education funding letter number at a number lower than MAEP. And so those are the types of things we'll be looking at. There may be some justification. I don't want to prejudge this bill right now, but those are some of the concerns we have going in, and we'll be watching the process.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we point out that this bill would spend $107 million more dollars than was given last year. And last year was a record number allocated for K through 12. And the last thing, it's super important, this bill is going to essentially be a block grant to school districts. Here, superintendent, here's your money. You go figure out what's the best way to spend it, just like it is under MAEP right now.
So it's still less than MAEP.
It will be less than what this MAEP magical formula that nobody really knows is, but it would be $107 million more dollars than a record amount that was given last year.
Let's move to infrastructure now. Another bit of unfinished business from last year, and not mentioned in the State of the State address, as we said, and that's infrastructure. Money for roads and bridges and upkeep on those roads and bridges. How do you both feel about the different proposals for dealing with it this year?
Senate doesn't have a proposal, and so we can't talk about it. The House has been aggressive, and I understand why. It's the big predominant issue that's facing the state right now in terms of the things that you can see and that you know have to be addressed. I thought the comments on the floor from both Representative Lamar and Representative Reynolds were well placed. And so I get the need for action, and I think that what you see there is a coming together of that chamber to say we're going to address this in some way, both with the legislation that was passed last year and this year. You heard Lieutenant Governor Reeves talk about numbers. It is clear to me the appetite is there in the House and the numbers are there in the House to do something. So the impetus is really going to be on the Senate increasingly. Yeah. They're going to have to decide if they want to act. And if they don't, they'll only have themselves to blame, and I think it will come with some pretty sharp political consequences. But good for the House. They did a pretty good job, I thought. I thought that the idea that you have a comprehensive plan moving forward was a step in the right direction, so, you know, good work.
Tate Reeves is one of the smartest thinkers in the state from a policy standpoint. No matter what you think about Tate Reeves, and if you go and you ask people who deal with him, Republican, Democrat, they say, he's a smart guy. He also understands politics. He is not going to do nothing on infrastructure in 2018. They just have a different plan of how to get to an in-line agreement in 2018.
They being the Senate.
Yeah, I'm sorry, they being the Senate. Thank you, Wilson. The House is raring to go from day one. There's nothing wrong with that. They brought some stuff forward that they had last year, some bonding authority, some if we hit these growth triggers, you'll get this much money. But this is a new thing, taking $100-something million from the use tax revenues that are collected to dedicate directly to infrastructure. A certain percentage will go to counties, a certain percentage of cities, a certain percentage at MDA where they could go get grants. I think the Senate is like, listen, we want to see what Congress is going to do. I mean, one of the things the House said is we would put a moratorium on building new roads. Well, what if the federal government came out and Congress and the president signed a bill that said there's a certain amount of money that you can go get, but only for new construction? Well, what the House bill said, no new roads. So I think they're both fine to go along the path they are, and I don't fault either one of them for going along the path they are. But it's a 90-day session, and I feel 100% confident at the end of the session there will be a comprehensive infrastructure plan that will help throughout the state.
Well, and to his credit, he did say that they would pass those House bills to the extent that at the end of the session they feel like those are the best proposals. So, you know, we're getting the right lip service. I think that he's staying attentive, but I understand the House. I understand. This is what you're hearing every day. And frankly, let's be honest, it's not the Senate. It's Lieutenant Governor Reeves. Rank and file senators have no idea what the super secret plan is.
We've got 1 minute left. I want to get your quick thoughts on the State of the State address. Brendan, first, what your reaction to the State of the State?
These are historically low information events. I thought this one was particularly thin on policy, but this governor gives a good speech. I think we can all agree to that.
Austin?
Yeah, I don't think they're big news-making events either. I mean, I didn't think this one was either. You know, talking about jobs and access to health care are things that are obviously important for the state. And I think those who like the governor thought he gave a good speech, and those who don't like him sort of wondered why he didn't bring up this point or that point.
And as you said, 90 days to go in the session, or 90 days for the full session, so there's plenty of more time to go. Thank you both, as always.
Thank you.
We are out of time. Don't forget, you can watch the program on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. And we invite you to join us again next Friday night here on MPB for another edition of At Issue. Good night.